What is a game? Is it nothing more than a mere cluster of code? Something devoid of value beyond allowing its users, the players, a momentary escape from reality? A functional process with no intrinsic worth? Well, I don't agree with any of that. To me, a game is art in itself. It is the result of the tireless effort of countless developers, artists, striving to convey something, to share something. However, in today's world, technological advancement often overshadows the artistic value of these works. The modernization of graphics and the fascination with photorealism, with simulating our reality, has blinded the current generation. They fail to look back and see that older games aren't just products past the expiration date, but rather unique experience crafted with deliberate purpose. Amidst all this, an initiative emerged to modernize certain aspects of games and bring them to current platforms, the remasters. The goal, in theory, parallels the restoration of an old painting, clearing away the crime, in this case, bugs that couldn't be fixed before, enhancing the colors, upscaling textures made for lower resolutions, and future-proofing the work by bringing it to modern platforms like the PC. The problem is, that remains strictly theoretical. The truth is, remasters nowadays are nothing more than an excuse. For some, it is an excuse to alter the original art direction with zero regard for the developer's intent. For others, it is an excuse to re-release an old title without changing a single thing, while charging significantly more than the original launch price. It is a complete mess. Let's take The Witcher 3, a game from 2015, as our first example. I believe that at this moment, most people who play video games have, at the very least, heard directly about it. It is considered by many to be one of the best Western RPGs ever released and one of the highest rated. But for the moment, let's forget all that. Let's focus solely on its art direction. In December 2022, CD Projekt Red released for free an update modernizing The Witcher 3. This update was massive, and besides adding some new graphic technologies, it also added tech like ray tracing and DLSS. At the time, almost everyone praised the update, saying it was something magnificent and that the game was more beautiful than ever. But how much of that is really true? The original The Witcher 3 featured a unique art style, reminiscent of a painting. It followed a different path from The Witcher 2, which, although it didn't seek photorealism, tried to get much closer to it. The Witcher 3 uses its color palette very precisely to generate different types of emotions in the player and deepen immersion even further. Volin, one of the game's regions marked by war, is characterized by its desaturated autumn colors. It is a very gloom region, and this is very apparent. Skellige, on the other hand, uses a coloring style of grandiose bleakness, focusing on colors like blue, grey, and white to convey the feeling of a harsh, cold environment. Everything is thought out in the smallest details. Even the style of the vegetation, which people complained about at launcher for being less detailed models than those present in its predecessor, fits perfectly with the art style adopted here. Now, let's compare this with the remaster and its forced attempt to follow a more photorealistic path. The color palette now looks more like a post-processing filter that doesn't quite fit the world. Thanks to the ray tracing lighting system, this becomes even more evident. Everything gets more contrasted and separated. The black is too black, and the other colors add up much stronger. As a consequence, the world ends up losing its life. It ceases to be reminiscent of a painting and turns into something new, something that isn't coherent with everything else, something that wasn't planned, something that simply came out. Can we really say that this is beautiful? Shadows work in real time is something interesting to see, but to what point is this pertinent enough to justify the destruction of the original art direction in favor of a simulation closer to our own reality? I believe some people might be having trouble understanding how this is a problem. So let's use a more practical example. Imagine that today they announce a remaster of the Mona Lisa, a painting made by Da Vinci centuries ago. The reason for this remaster is to make the painting fit how art is expressed in postmodernity. Imagine if they say that the tone of yellow and green used in the original Mona Lisa's constitution doesn't serve anymore, and now they leave it contrasted, focusing on an entirely different color palette. The thing is, even if I were to say they won't change anything besides that, Would you accept this? It would be unthinkable, don't you agree? The painting as a whole represents Da Vinci's artistic vision in the context he created. It is something unique that came only from him. It is not something modernizable, and the very alteration of the color palette would make you feel something completely different by looking at it. Do you understand now? If it is like this with paintings, then why doesn't it work like this with games? Why do people have problems accepting that the developer's artistic vision is close to that of artists who paint pictures, of writers who write books? Imagine if they decide to remaster Crime and Punishment without Dostoevsky writing it. Would that still be Crime and Punishment? A good part of the Witcher 3 development team K members aren't no longer at CD Projekt, and even so, their work was mutilated. But well, maybe you find this example somewhat superficial, maybe for you, this change went down well and in a certain way managed to even surpass the original. It is something unthinkable for me, since at this point I don't even know if you could call this new work The Witcher 3, but maybe that's not the case for you. That being so, let's take a look at other remasters.
Usually when building a scene like this, I start out by placing the rocks. I sort of look at the lay of the land, which is generated first, and then I try and pick out spots where a rock might naturally occur. I've got this big one here. So I would just take a big rock like this and plop it down, sink it to an appropriate height, and then I'll go and add like little satellite rocks around it to try and create a feel that there's some natural erosion going on. Came out looking for source textures for some of the surfaces in the game. Specifically terrain textures of like pictures of the ground, things like that. It's really tough to find images like that online, for those purposes anyway. With a rock, a lot of the visual impact is going to boil down from the texturing, from the coloration in it, and then using like shader techniques to try and get the shine and sheen and the cragginess to it, like how the lighting splays across it. This color and texture is perfect for some of the textures that we were trying to recreate in the game. I mean, obviously the moss in general is mostly green, but there's lots of other little details here that really help make the textures more believable. There's lots of other little browns in here, lots of little highlights in the green, and just other little random bits of nature. I've always obsessed over natural foliage and just greenery in games in general. For some reason, I think that's really cool. It's just not something that you normally see, and I definitely think it's a fun environment in a game to play in. If you think about all the leaves individually, they're probably pretty close to the same color, but when you see them all in a scene like this, there's so much contrast and
Released out of the blue in April 2025, we have The Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion Remastered, the remaster of a 2060 classic, now in the Unreal Engine 5. I don't believe I need to introduce this game much here. I mean, most people have already heard about Skyrim and as a consequence know Oblivion as well. That being so, just as I did with The Witcher 3, let's cast aside all the extra content and focus on what really matters for this video, the art direction. While it has its fair share of issues regarding asset reuse, all of Oblivion's vegetation, every large structure present in the game, the entire environment itself was polished down to the very last detail. This is a case where no one can come along and say the developer's intent wasn't there, since in the game's making of documentary, they make it very clear just how much they focus on this part. The recreation of something that exists in our world through the lens of an artist who tries to replicate it the way they see it. That is what makes the original Oblivion, even though it isn't photorealistic and doesn't have textures in absurdly high resolution, is still a game, an experience worth of respect. Now, let's move on to the remaster, built with the technology we have today. Here, we have the opposite of what the original Oblivion set out to do. Even in the original Oblivion, there was an attempt to replicate the world through the artist's vision. In the remaster, there was an attempt to make something generically high-detailed. Character models with countless polygons, but with no life whatsoever, resembling plastic dolls. The vegetation, which formerly had been one of the most unique characteristics in Oblivion, is now nothing more, nothing less than a generic cluster of overlapping assets. The lightning, which before had been manually crafted to get as close as possible to the artistic vision of the developers, of the artists, now carries with it an orange filter close to the color of urine, characteristic of Unreal Engine 5. All of this combined makes what was supposed to be an even more elevated version of a classic into the absolute worst version, artistically speaking, to play. Mind you, I have no problem at all if you like these remastered versions of these games. Even with all the defects present in them, it is still safe to state that they carry with them a fraction of the original experience. My point is to show just how artistically poor they are and how much this kills the general experience. A good portion of the people I talk to who, for example, prefer Oblivion Remastered over Oblivion Original do not do so because they think Oblivion Remastered is genuinely better artistically, but rather because they view games as product. To them, the original Oblivion is just a product past its expiration date. Now let's move to the final example of this video, and one that, unlike the previous ones, follows a different trend of remasters. Remember when I mentioned earlier that one of the excuses for remastering a game was simply to re-release it with a higher price tag than the original? Well, here we are with Tales of Berseria Remastered, a game that changed virtually nothing from the original yet is launched at a higher price. Actually, to be fair, I can't say it changed nothing. They added the feature to mark locations on the map and the incredible feature to disable enemy encounters. Yeah. Bandai Namco is usually a master at this sort of thing. Just look at the Tales of Berseria Remastered launch. But what really makes Berseria Remastered stand out among the company's bad examples is the fact that the original game already exists on Steam. Given the lack of significant additions, one would expect the original PC version to just receive an update with these two amazing new features. But no. Contrary to expectations, which were already non-existent considering Berseria is a recent game released less than 10 years ago, Bandai outdid themselves. They went even further, categorizing the remaster as a completely separate entry. I understand that for platforms that didn't have access to the original, like the Xbox and the Switch, this remaster functions more like a port, the logic holds up there. But when you factor PC into the equation, or the fact that the PS5 can already run the PS4 version via backward compatibility, the idea of launching a separate remastered version for these platforms loses all sense. Regarding the price, I believe some of you noticed that technically, depending on your country, the remaster is launching about $10 cheaper, at least on PC. That's not the case where I live in, but it is true elsewhere. The problem is, when it comes to sales, the remastered version will likely take much longer to drop to the price point where the original sits at today. I really can't defend this mess. I could list countless other examples here, like the GTA trilogy, the Silent Hill HD collection on PS3, Dark Souls Remastered, and so on. But I think I've already gotten my point across. Ultimately, video games are the only modern art form where the consumers themselves refuse to acknowledge them as art. The mental gymnastics required to place Red Dead Redemption 2 and Fortnite on the same artistic shelf is immense. It's a pursuit of such ephemeral pleasure that it ends up reflecting on the user's final experience. Saying things like, "Oh, it's too old for me," or "it feels too dated," only makes this even clearer. I have yet to meet an art enthusiast who dislikes a painting because it is too old, or an avid reader who dismisses a book for the same reason. The very concept is nonsensical, no matter how we look at it. Some complain that the gameplay in Game X is too dated, when usually it just deviates from the modern standards they are used to consuming. But are these modern standards actually good? Is playing every single game the exact same way actually a positive thing? Is it really so terrible when something breaks the mold and follows a unique path? Just because two games share a general genre, like action games, doesn't mean they need to play exactly the same. It is precisely this kind of mindset that discourages companies from creating anything unique today. This mentality and the financial return it generates is exactly why we are drowning in these low-quality remasters. Looking back at 2025, I can count on one hand the games that genuinely try to do something new, and compared to previous years, that was actually above average. To close this video, the question remains: how long will we continue to ignore games as art? How long will you keep giving your money to artistically inferior versions of great games? How long will you dedicate your time to them? How long will you let yourself remain a slave to market trends.